Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.
Hello, everyone, and welcome home to USA Global TV and Radio. I'm Dr. Jacalyn Kerbeck, and our show today is the Corner Bookstore. For today and today only, we are at a special time. Normally, this would be the film and music show slot, so we will be returning next week at the same time as usual, 1 hour before. The star and host of our show today is Mr. Red O'Loughlin, and he will be taking over this role for the first Thursday of every month. Diane Floyd-Babe will be returning for the other Thursdays in the month. Let's welcome Red. If you haven't met him before, you need to do so. Go over to his website, redolaughlin.com, go to his LinkedIn, Red O'Loughlin, and connect with him. He is an Amazon #1 best-selling author. He is a publisher. He is a veteran. Thank you so much for your service to Red and to all the vets who are out there. He also is someone who knows and understands longevity and what it takes to have a healthy lifestyle. He is a TV show host here, obviously, and a radio show host. He's one of our expert presenters on Talking Heads, and he's also one of our elevated listeners, among many other things. Let's welcome Red to our show, and then we'll welcome back Doug Lawrence. Hi, Red. Welcome.
Howdy, y'all. Just another wonderful opportunity to be here in TV land with USA Global TV and Radio Network. I really appreciate the opportunity for the first Thursday of every month.
Thank you so much, Red. Congratulations to you. This is one of our most popular shows, so I'm really glad that you are at the helm here and sharing this role with Diane Floyd-Babe. So once again, I'm just happy to have you. I'm going to turn the show over to you for you to interview our team member and friend, Doug Lawrence. I'll be producing. Have a great show.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jacalyn. Really appreciate that. I think Dr. Jacalyn covered most things. I'm a writer, have been forever and ever and ever. I have almost 1,000 original content articles on LinkedIn, about 1,500 on my blog website. I write almost every single day. My primary focus is health and wellness. I research the human body at the cellular level. Chemically speaking, I look for cause and effect relationships. That's what I write about. That's what I speak about. And I help authors with their books, publishing, and some other things. So that's briefly about me. Everything else that you would want to know, just give me a buzz on my phone or send me an email. I've been more than happy to open a conversation with you. Doug Lawrence, I met several months ago as a person of interest here on USA Global TV and Radio Network. And then we've had other occasions when we're on together with other shows. And Doug has a book, and this Corner Bookstore is the place to tell the world about it. So Doug, please join me here, and let's get started with you.
Well, hello, Red. How are you doing? It's been a while.
Exceptionally well, as always.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, it's. I appreciate this opportunity to be able to talk a bit more about the book I've written, and we'll see, kind of see where the conversation goes from there.
Okay, why don't you tell us a little bit about Doug Lawrence before you were an author? What was your life like way back when?
Oh my gosh. So Doug Lawrence is a retired Royal Canadian Mounted Police officer. So having served about 25 years in the police force and ending up with post-traumatic stress as a result of that, I did in a number of different leadership positions, some management consulting, and then ended up in 2009, 2010 started my own business, TalentC, focused on all things mentoring. So mentoring program implementation into organizations, one-on-one mentoring, leadership mentoring, basically the best way to describe it is all things mentoring. And then ended up starting, like I said, starting my own company, which has evolved over time to being one that, instead of being solely focused on just mentoring, we've now taken a look at how mentoring can be part of the support structure for mental health. And I've been able to move forward, certainly move forward with that. And that's what was sort of the driving force, I guess, for the writing of You Are Not Alone.
Well, tell us a little bit about what your interests were in reading and those kinds of things way back when. Obviously, most authors that I've ever met are incredible readers. And when I first started looking at, well, how did they introduce this topic, or how do they start a sentence, right? I started paying more attention to the mechanics of other authors. So I'm guessing that you probably have similar interests, that you have some kinds of genres that you love to read, and you just kind of lose yourself sometimes in those books.
I do. And actually, I do have a couple authors that I gravitate towards. Ken Blanchard is definitely one. And I remember I took 2 or 3 of his books one time on a holiday. I went to Mexico for a holiday, and I remember I thought, oh, gosh, Doug, you're only going to get through one of these books. And I can't remember if I had 2 or 3 books, but in less than the first week, I went through and I read them all. And what I found was that what really intrigued me about his writing style was the fact that he told a story, and that you just kept turning the pages because you wanted to find out, how does this story end? And is it something I can relate to or equate to, that it draws me into sort of, going along with him on his story or his journey that he's talking about.
Interesting. I had one book I was reading one night in bed, long time ago, and all of a sudden the alarm went off. It was the alarm to get out of bed to go to work. Somehow I had managed to read all throughout the whole. I never really realized it was throughout the whole night. I was just so captured by that book. Nowadays, I use 15 minutes of reading in lieu of maybe a 7 or 8 or 9 minute nap. And I find that reading, depending on what I'm reading, can be very, very relaxing. It just takes your mind away from everything. And so, well, tell us a little bit about your writing history. When did you develop a proficiency to write, just in general, and then we'll get into your book?
How I got started writing was one of my colleagues that I went through RCMP training with. We were actually in the same troop as when we went through training, and he used to write these little motivational statements that he would send to his children every morning, and he called it Notes from Papa. And he ended up, he went through a process where he actually combined all of those notes from Papa, and he wrote in essence wrote a book and self-published and moved forward with that. And he and I were having a conversation virtually one day, and he said, Doug, you need to write a book. And I went, no, that's not anything in my wheelhouse. I said, tell me how you went through all that. And so he told the story of how he went through and had hired a ghostwriter and did all that sort of stuff. And he said, with everything that you do, and I've been publishing a lot of articles on my blog site, and I forget how many there were, but there was lots. And he said, why don't you contact this ghostwriter and see if, she'll help you pull together all this material, and you too can publish a book and get it out there and sort of see. And that was The Gift of Mentoring, was the book that I went down that path to get it going. Fast forward to, where we are today, and it's a completely different picture for me as to the writing, the whole writing scene, and then going through the publishing of the book and all of that. So, and like I said, the book is "You Are Not Alone" is the title. It's made the Amazon #1 bestseller list, not only here in North America but in the UK as well.
Wow. So you had this thought that you wanted to write another. This is your second book?
Yes.
Okay. So you had your first book on what you were doing before. Tell us about a little bit of the genesis. What prompted you to think that you needed a book in this area? Is it something that's helping you with your consulting, or is this something that's more personal to you for another reason?
All of the above.
Okay.
All of the above would be the best way to sort of answer that. So I know that, the gift of mentoring was written with the idea in mind of not looking to, make a copious quantity of money or everything else, but the idea behind it was to, if I could enhance how people viewed mentoring and gave them a better understanding of what mentoring was all about, then to me that was worth the journey of writing The Gift of Mentoring, which was my first book. And so, looking at it from that perspective, it was to be able to get that message out. I remember I spoke at a conference, and I think I took 12 or 15 copies of the book, and I gave all of them away because I did my speaking opportunity. I presented and told some stories, and I remember saying to the people that I said, "I'm so sorry, I didn't realize that there would be such an interest in wanting a copy of the book, but here's what I'm going to do." And what I had done was, at the end of my talk, at my presentation, I would meet whoever made it to the lobby first, and I would give, first come, first serve for a copy of the book. And that's kind of what they did. And I got mobbed for my short time of fame, where, there was probably 20 or 30 people all vying for a copy of the book. And it was, what I found that was interesting was a lot of people said, and this is something I hear quite often, is that I saw myself in your story. And so, and now I can relate to how I may want to deal with things a little bit differently. So that was, sort of the story with, The Gift of Mentoring.
Okay, with You Are Not Alone, what audience did you have in mind when you started saying, I really need to share this with somebody? So you're writing to a particular group of people. Tell us about how you kind of figured out who that group is and how you're trying to add value to it.
So, the group itself it was both books actually sort of traveled much the same journey. And in both cases, I was asked by people that were that were interested in what I had been writing before, and so what they basically said is, you need to write a book about this. And especially, You Are Not Alone is the idea behind the book, is that mentoring has a place in the world in the mental health space. It can be part of the support structure for mental health. And so that was the audience that I was writing to. And the impetus for writing comes from the people that were, aware of the work and stuff that I was doing and the research that I had been doing on mentoring and mental health. And what they were basically saying is, you need to write a book about this and get that message out there. And that's what I've done. What's interesting is that, and I know it in just more recently, but I'm gearing up to do a session with the psychiatric nurses. And part of the reason that I'm being asked to do that is a couple people purchased copies of the book and have gone through and read it and said, we need to bring you in and get you in front of our faculty so that, they get a deeper, more appreciative understanding of mentoring and mental health, and how we need to actually have a mentoring program in our organization, and one that is a combination of mentoring, but also mentoring and mental health, and how that's going to help us make a difference. And so what it's done for me with the book is that it's heightened the awareness. And I've actually had comments coming back saying, I actually had one here the other day where we're gearing up to do a peer-to-peer support group. Actually, tonight is when it's supposed to take place, and my co-facilitator has, said, I've got a couple copies of your book, and I've been farming them out to people who I feel can benefit from, your story, your message. And I found that to be very reassuring that I made the right choice going down this path, number one, I guess. But number two is that, there is actually a place for mentoring and mental health.
It sounds like the book is more for caregivers than for self improvement. Is that a fair statement?
It does fit in for both. Yes, it is for caregivers, but it's also, for people that are going through some self-care challenges and things like that, and people that want to, have a better understanding when it comes to themselves, as far as the mental health picture is concerned. Like there's a section, we talk a bit about grief, and, I went through that myself. And as a result of that, I'm able to share that story with whoever is wanting to listen. And I'm hoping that I'm able to share, my coping mechanisms and all of that to be able to help people go through and deal with things themselves on a better playing field than what they are today.
Okay, you mentioned earlier Ken Blanchard as one of your first books that you kind of really fell in love with. And part of the reason was the story after story after story just kind of captured you. Why don't you give us a couple of the stories that are in your book to get an idea of what kind of stories are you associating with mental health and mentoring?
The big, well, there's obviously a couple stories. There's one where I was in the Royal Canadian Mounted Police and stationed in an isolated rural community in northern British Columbia, Canada, and we were getting set to put together a men's hockey team to go down the highway or the road, the gravel road, a little distance to play the neighboring community and stuff like that. And one of the young people that ended up making the hockey team, he was only 16 years of age, and he made the men's team. And we were so proud of his accomplishments at being able to do so. And, he went home to share this great news with his family and with his family, with his mother and father, only to find that when he got home, they'd been drinking most of the day and were fairly inebriated, and he had nobody to turn to share his great news with. And so he ended up going into the bedroom and grabbing a rifle, and he took his own life. And I ended up being the police officer because it was a small community. There was only two of us, and usually I was the one that got designated to go on the majority of the calls for service. I got called to go to their place, and it was for me, it was to start probably at an early stage. It was the start of the post-traumatic stress that I ended up incurring, but it was having to do the investigation and then having to transport his body to the closest morgue, which was 8 hours by vehicle in -40 weather on a gravel road. And I obviously, that whole scenario, that whole story that's included in the book has stuck with me all these years, and I still struggle at times with that, and trying to figure out, are there, because what I ended up doing is my coping mechanism at that particular time point was I had turned to alcohol. And so I ended up coming home after, because it took us a day to go down and a day to come back. And when I got home, I was still emotionally challenged, is the best way to describe it. And I remember coming home, going to the little cabinet that I had in the place I was living in, and hauled out, that was where I had all my liquor supply, and I hauled out a bottle, threw the cap away, and I drank as much of it as I possibly could, thinking that that was the best way for me to deal with that particular situation. So that story and sort of the outcomes in that are contained in You Are Not Alone.
Does drinking help anybody cope?
No. We like to think it does, but it doesn't. And I've gone through, that had an impact on my wife and my two children. And I've got myself, and this is obviously a number of years since that particular situation, but I've got myself to a place now where I don't drink. I haven't probably it's coming up 3 years now, and because it's not the solution. It is, all it does is it makes things probably worse, because you end up masking bad behavior by drinking more and more and more, and that's definitely not the solution.
So you can also mask that same bad behavior with pills and other things too, I assume.
Yes, you can. And I was fortunate, I guess, for lack of a better choice of words, that the only thing I had access to was alcohol at that particular time. Sure, I could have ordered pills and had them shipped by mail and stuff like that, but it would boil down to one of two options. Number one would be, alcohol to drink until you can mask whatever you're dealing with, or suicide. And, I took the alcohol path.
So I'm guessing that's probably the genesis of a lot of prescription drug addictions too, is that it's there, it kind of covers something up. And then when you have a real traumatic event, then you say, oh, I'll just go back, just like you go back for alcohol. It's a coping mechanism of sorts, but it's not one that's effective.
No, it's definitely not. And yes, you're absolutely correct. It is a coping mechanism, because, you take a look at what are some of the things that I can do to maybe mitigate or lessen the situation. And, you've got alcohol, you've got drugs, you've got, all of those things. And then ultimately you end up at that really dark place where, suicide becomes the option that you're left with. And, it's the biggest thing, one of the best coping mechanisms that people need to understand that works the best is just talking with somebody. So, have that circle of friends, have that mentor who can, kind of stand beside you and be there to support you. But it's being able to find somebody that can listen and hear and who's non-judgmental. That's your best possible coping mechanism that you could ever have.
Nowadays with Zoom and other StreamYard, et cetera, you don't have to actually be in the same country to have a mentor that can help you. I know a lot of people use books and videos and other things to help them as if those people were mentors, just as you with Ken Blanchard there, you're just absorbing information. But you need that exchange, you need the trust, you need several things there, not just having a mentor, but you need somebody that's going to be not necessarily accountable per se, but semi-accountable. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, it is. I'm glad you brought that up, because the whole trust aspect of it is so important. You need to be able to build that relationship that's premised on trust, and confidentiality is another key thing. But what I typically do, and I think back to, I was doing a virtual mentoring session with a new mentee, or a new person that needed to be mentored, and I don't know what intuition, call it what you want, but I knew that there was something more there. So I shared my story about having to, dealing with post-traumatic stress, and then, the aspect of dealing with grief, and how grief, having lost my wife to cancer in 2021, I was, dealing with grief and all of those things. And as I opened up and shared more and more, I could see the walls come down with this, with my new mentee. And before I know it, this individual is starting to share their challenges, certainly from a mental health perspective. And what it did for the both of us was we were able to work together to customize the mentoring that needed to take place for her, both on a personal, but just as much on a professional, on a career development aspect. So it was what it helped demonstrate was that if you build that level of trust, those walls will come down, and it's going to, as a mentor, it's going to enable you to be able to create that deeper, richer mentoring experience.
Okay, you mentioned death of a spouse. Obviously, that's a very big item. But when you mentioned the kid that was in the hockey thing, he came home to share his joy, and he was unable to do that. That seems like two totally different ends of the spectrum. Yet we see a lot of teenagers who commit suicide, and you ask yourself why. And I'm guessing that the stress levels that we just take for granted sometimes are really big things to people who don't have that experience. So I know that when I talk about stress and write about it, it's not the stress that happens to you, it's what you reach out there and grab a hold of and you won't let go. And when you're looking at the from a mentoring perspective or from an educational or awareness perspective, sharing your story, maybe sometimes it might be, well, I didn't have a death of a spouse, I just lost a job. How do you give some level of relevancy from one loss of something or one traumatic impact of something? I'm sure you probably have a lot of stories of people or people or things that you've been through yourself. Obviously, that one with the teenager and the hockey is, it just gave me an ill feeling. I just can't imagine doing that. But people have to do that whether they want to or not. It's just part of life. But tell us how you work that different spectrum of different levels of stress.
So another example, and we've kind of talked our way through it, and sometimes that's the most important thing is, number one, being able to listen and hear and be non-judgmental, but number two is to be able to listen and hear and kind of get a sense of where the person is, and then begin a conversation, one that's premised on trust and confidentiality, to kind of together work your way through. Because one of my mantras, if you want to call it that, is that I tell people I'll never leave you on the island by yourself. And so I'm going to go on this journey with you and help you get through all of that. And so, as to basically trying to figure out what's our options here, and you're absolutely right that how you deal with, say, the 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 young lad up in the north who death by suicide, versus say somebody that I'm in a mentoring relationship with them, and they've just recently gone through a breakup with they've had a relationship termination because both parties have sort of decided, okay, we're going to go our separate ways, and there's grief attached to that. And so it's being able to, as a mentor, to be able to ask the right questions to help stimulate the conversation, but at the same time to not be in a place where you're suggesting or telling the individual what they need to do in order to continue to move on. Because the last thing you'd want to do is, well, probably wasn't a good fit for you, and maybe we can look to see what, there's probably something better that's out there for you. If I had a horn, I'd be honking it right now to sort of say, no, we don't go down that path whatsoever. And, sometimes, all that people really, truly want is just to be able to have somebody that will listen. And so that's kind of the hallmark of what I do is I'm a great listener, and I listen to what that person is saying, and then from there have a conversation where we can work together to be able to figure out how we're going to deal with it.
The listening mentor. Where have I heard that before?
I wonder.
I had a friend who had two boys, and both of them got super involved in drugs, and no matter how much money they spent, it didn't work time and time again. Eventually, both kids outgrew it. They became good, upstanding adults, raised families. But sometimes we go through phases, or not we, but maybe sometimes we do too. But how do you tell somebody? It just sounds like a phase to me that they're going through rebellion. Sure, at the teenage level, I'm sure there's just so many things out there with peer pressure and other, technology issues, and there's just a lot of stuff out there. How do you keep up to date with this kind of stuff?
Well, you definitely have to be plugged into what's going on for sure. Is it, university students who are dealing with the stress of assignments and getting things done, and, having pressure sometimes from home to, it's kind of one of the adages was, oh, Mom, Dad, look, I got 98% on this paper I wrote, and Dad turning around and saying, and where's the other 2%? So it's that sort of mentality that you want to be in a place where you can, help people work their way through that and be able to help them deal with it. So, and it's, that's just one example of something that you could, come up with. So it's being able to, I know how I go through that approach is I go through it from the aspect of I need to understand what the root cause of the behavior is. And then from there, we can formulate some questions we're going to ask to help stimulate a conversation. And I need to know kind of when to button up and listen, and when it's appropriate for me to maybe share a lived experience. And that's not so much me saying this is the way that I did it, so therefore you should go forth and do it that way, but it's sharing a lived experience and maybe framing it at the end with a question like, I wonder what would have happened if we would have done this, or I wonder what would have happened if we would have done this or this or this, and not framing it as I wonder what would happen if you did this, but making it more of a collaborative approach versus a singular approach, and that will work a lot better.
Yeah, it's interesting. I wasn't aware of it. I heard something the other day on TV about one of the newest addictions is cell phones. That people just can't put them down. Not that that's a traumatic event or maybe stress-inducing, I guess, if you get emotionally involved in what you're seeing, reading, watching, whatever it may happen to be. But I'm guessing there's probably some level of continual education that you have to do to keep up to date with not only what are the latest things that people have problems with, but are there better ways of communicating and listening?
Yeah, definitely. I do a lot of reading, a lot of research, and around the whole topic of, and being mindful, I guess, of what's topical as well. But lots of research around and staying plugged into sort of the heartbeat of mentoring. So because it's changing and evolving as time goes on, and I need to be sort of on at the forefront to be able to sort of say these are some procedures and concepts that I'm starting to see a shift. It's like us taking a look at having this conversation today about the aspect of mentoring and mental health. Is that there was a time a year ago where that was not even on the radar screen for somebody to be talking about mentoring and mental health, and it's becoming, as I look at the research that's now out there and how people are starting to see that there is a lot of value in having we'll call him or her a mental health mentor, that having that in place is really important. And it's what it's going to do is it's going to bridge the gap between when I have my meeting with my psychologist to when I have my next meeting with my psychologist, which typically would probably span a 3 to 4, maybe even 6 months before I can get back on their calendar and get seen. And if I have my trusted mentor that I can go to, if nothing else, just to listen to what I'm experiencing, then that's a good thing.
Okay, Doug, we're getting toward the end here. I'd like to give you a couple minutes where you can market, who your book is for, how do people get in touch with you, who's an ideal client that, you mentioned some different kinds of mental health nurses and other things. So why don't you give us a little bit of rundown of who would really benefit from the book? How do they get in touch with you? Who would you like to talk with, both from a mentoring and from a book perspective?
So certainly from, who I want to talk to is anybody that feels that they could use, a mentor, whether it be in a work environment or whether it's from a mental health perspective. So please, feel free to, reach out to me, and that can happen a number of ways. But if you want to reach out to me, you can come through my website, www.TalentC, so the word talent with the C on the end.ca, and go to the contact page and reach out to me that way. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn and just search on my name, Doug Lawrence. I'm relatively active, and you shouldn't have much of a problem in locating me, and just, direct message me, and we can set up a time to have a conversation and go from there. And then probably the best possible way, probably for both of us, is if you are to send an email message to me, and my email is doug.lawrence, so that's doug.lawrence at TalentC, so the word talent with the C on the end.ca. And if you send that off to me, I'll get back to you definitely as quickly as I possibly can. And we can set up a time to chat and kind of go from there as to, what our next steps would be in that particular case. And for those of you who are interested in acquiring a copy of You Are Not Alone, the book is available on Amazon, on amazon.ca and .com. And please feel free to go ahead and pick up your copy of the book. And I welcome hearing your comments and feedback on the book. Just as an insider's tip, there's another book coming, and it's going to be just as good.
I did a little bit of research on trying to find Doug Lawrence before the show, and there are a lot of Doug Lawrences out there. So I did Doug Lawrence Canada because I knew you were there and you popped up, but I'm just looking at your LinkedIn site and it's Doug Lawrence International Mentor.
Yeah.
So between Canada and International Mentor, you should be able to do a digital search and find Doug. And Doug, I really truly appreciate the time that you spent today with us here on the USA Global TV and Radio Network.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity. This has been great.
I look forward to us joining again on a future show, whether it's another one with your next book or whatever it may happen to be. So take care, enjoy, and I look forward to our next conversation.
Take care.
And this is Red O'Loughlin on the Corner Bookstore, my first inaugural event here, first Thursday of every month. And literally here in 20 minutes, I will be on The Wise Ones, again on the USA Global TV and Radio Network. And following that immediately, 20 minutes later, 20 minutes later, we'll be Talking Heads. So I have 2 shows coming up, and please join us. You can always find the shows archived on YouTube. And I thank you very, very much for your time today. Take care. Bye.